This is the podcast asking what's going on in our society and world that feels increasingly chaotic and uncertain. Each episode takes you on a journey into thought-provoking topics ranging from global challenges and spirituality to health, wellness, relationships, and living consciously. This podcast dives deep into what truly matters, how to live in harmony with our natural world, build meaningful communities, and explore the profound questions at the heart of the human experience. Well, Paul Hilton, you are a world-renowned photojournalist and conservationist. You've built your career on the front lines of some of the world's most harrowing environmental crises. Welcome to the What's Going On podcast. I am so excited to have you on. The man, the myth, the legend. You are an absolute legend, honestly, in all seriousness.
I don't know about that, but
you are a true hero.
Thank you for reconnecting after all these years.
Yes, you are an absolute hero in my eyes. You are out there on the front lines. You're fighting the good fight. You're just one of the good guys. And I so appreciate you coming on today. I'm so excited to chat. So yeah, you tell such powerful stories through your photography. Do you want to start by maybe giving us the background on how you got inspired to go into photojournalism and photography and working towards showing the world what's going on with a lot of the environmental crises and wildlife exploitation? What sparked the journey?
Sure. How far do you want me to go? Right back to my childhood?
I know. Give me the Cliff Notes version. And yes, if there was something in childhood that, sparked your journey and made you the man that you are today, we'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, I'll just make it clear. I don't want to bore people with too much detail. Growing up, I really thought about photography, but where I grew up, people were sort of saying, go and get a real job, stop dreaming. I didn't really get into it till quite late. So maybe I think by early sort of like 25, I picked up my first professional camera, and then I was lucky enough to meet someone that really sort of influenced and showed me the tools of the trade and how to actually making a living. But actually wildlife and conservation photography was later on. Maybe another 5 years I was basically volunteering for a lot of different groups, WWF, Animals Asia Foundation in Hong Kong. So I was based in Hong Kong. And that's when the coin dropped. And I thought, actually, this is something I really want to pursue. This is something I really want to follow. And I was invited up to China to document the work of Wildlife Asia. And this amazing charity run by Jill Robinson, who literally single-handedly saved bears from the bear bile trade. So these Asiatic black bears were put into these cages, and they were given these drips that were put into their gallbladder. Mm-hmm. They were inserted and locked, and they're in these cages, and they were just dripping bile from these bears for year after year after year. And it was probably still to this day the most horrific. I still can't comprehend it, and sadly it's still going on. Yeah, it has got better.
I know.
A lot less bears in captivity, so it was that moment, and those images went around the world. I won some awards. There was one in National Geographic, and it really felt that I could use it as a tool for change. And that was sort of the moment where I decided I can do this. I'd like to do this for the rest of my life, kind of thing.
Wow.
So
that's the most inhumane practice I've seen. I've seen some footage of that, and it's absolutely hard to watch. So that's what got you going on this journey, though. That's interesting. I actually didn't know that. And we actually met back in 2019 when my sister and I were 2 of 8 that went with you into the jungle of Sumatra to go see the wild forest elephants and the orangutans, and I remember signing up, and then I always thought that we would go into the jungle and then go back to like a hotel, but then I got the packing list and it said like 1 to 2 person tent and life straw for drinking out of the river. And I was like, oh, this is like Naked and Afraid, except we're not naked, just really afraid. And it was an epic journey into the forest and just hiking for like 8 hours a day and seeing the amazing orangutans, which, you know, we share 98% of our DNA with, but yet they're so endangered that they might go extinct in our lifetime. So it was a truly epic experience to have. And I just really loved that trip with you. It was really eye-opening. But some of the devastation that we got to see there was from the palm oil plantations. I remember being able to see that firsthand. We were going into the jungle and passing just rows and rows and miles long of palm oil plantation after palm oil plantation. It was just devastating. And I remember getting out of the car and you said this is all fresh, and they had left like this one tree standing, and it was almost like that tree from Avatar. It was just, do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yes, it was magnificent. And it was heartbreaking, obviously, because we're witnessing all of this freshly decimated rainforest.
And then one giant tree just standing alone.
And one giant tree that they left. And it was like, and we'll put that image up here because it was just so profound. And I think we were just all speechless.
We're all in a really good mood, sad. And we're sort of, playing some music in the car. Yeah. Then we stopped the car and we saw the scene. Everyone just went quiet.
Yes,
and
it was.
Yeah, it was very poignant. And that's the Lhasa ecosystem, like the last place on Earth where they have tigers, rhinos, elephants, and orangutans. So it's a really amazing system.
Magical.
I spent a lot of my life up there. Sadly, I don't get to spend as much time as I used to up there. But things actually have improved on the ground in the Lhasa ecosystem.
Really? Oh, that makes my heart so happy.
Deforestation has slowed, and there is better management. There's still encroachment happening, but nowhere near as a scale as what it was. And that's just down to the hard work of the locals on the ground, just year after year, really, pushing their campaign. And palm oil companies are actually being held accountable, and things have changed. So I wouldn't say it's stopped, and the challenges are still there, but nowhere to the extent they were when you were there in sort of 2019.
Right.
Yeah.
So for anyone who's not familiar, can you just like briefly touch on like why palm oil is such a big problem and how it's so ecologically destructive?
Yeah, well, palm oil is Indonesia's biggest export. Indonesia, Malaysia, and it's sort of being used or being produced in different areas, in tropical areas around the world. So where you have tropical forests, it's perfect for palm oil, to grow palm oil. And it's in over 50% of our products on supermarket shelves. It's literally in everything. So it's not going to go away. We can't, people talk about boycotting it. We can't really, you can't boycott it. It's literally in everything.
I read labels though, and I will not buy anything with palm oil in it. But you're right; it's in so many things, from cookies and crackers.
Different names. So depending on how up you're on those different names, it's just constantly evolving and changing. And what we need is the industry to just manage, the production of palm oil in a better way, in a more sustainable way, and not taking up more tropical forest and using their already cleared land better. And obviously in some areas we need to rehabilitate and regenerate the forest in certain areas, corridors for wildlife to move. But really it's up to the public to put pressure on these palm oil companies to have better traceability, to make sure there's no conflict palm oil, to know that there's no new forests actually destroyed. So it's just going to take time to reform the industry, and it is happening. Groups like Rainforest Action Network, RAN, have done some great work, traceability on that, and holding companies accountable. So once again, it is slowly improving. But
well, that is really good news. Is there such thing as sustainable palm, though? I thought that I had heard, and maybe this is wrong, that when they cultivate the palm, they can only do it 4 or 5 times before the soil is so depleted that they literally have to just give up on that whole plot of land and move on to another plot. Have you heard that, or is
Yeah,
that
well,
not
no, it
accurate?
takes 25 years to mature. So after 25 years, they need to cut the tree and start again.
Oh,
It's very water
oh, I
intensive,
see.
so it does really deplete the soil from water. But if it's done right, they can manage it better and use the existing land better. Like I said, it's Indonesia's biggest domestic product. As they're not going to
Right.
stop palm oil. You're not going to stop palm oil. So it's just like how can they produce it more sustainably? They did create, I think, called the round table of sustainable palm oil, where it
I've
was
heard that.
where that was like a mechanism to hold companies accountable. But it's still it's not ideal, and it still needs a lot of work and a lot of reform, and it's work in progress.
Yeah. And I
But
remember
just to
they were,
know that the deforestation has slowed in and around Losa, it's it's so it's such a win for conservation. Even though it's not over, it's just it's like it's not continuing into the encroaching into the those last remaining habitats. So we're holding the line, so to speak. And to me, that's
right.
if we could just hold and just sort of take time for people to really understand what that ecosystem offers, not for just direct, water, clean water, soil, so many other different products, but also meant for mental health. These forests are so important for everything, for biodiversity, for ecosystem services, right? So it's just if we can just hold the line. And hopefully society really starts to grasp how important and why these are so important, things can change, right? I'm just trying to see,
Yes.
look at the positive in a quite a bad situation.
Right.
Yeah.
And no, that is such a relief for especially the wild forest elephants to not keep being encroached upon so they can actually have their home to live in. And I hope you can take more groups in there to see, because I think that's what would help foster the love for these amazing animals and just how beautiful the whole ecosystem is. So that is, I'm happy to hear that it is good news that the palm oil plantations are getting their act together.
Slowly but surely,
So to
things
say.
are changing
Yes.
on that front. There's still, don't get me wrong, there's still all the issues with poaching, and there's still other issues going on. But yeah, like I said, a lot of
Yeah.
people are doing a lot of good work there.
And it sounds like a lot of education for the local communities, because I remember they were selling the palm oil for just a couple cents a kilo, right? And it was like nothing. And they don't realize that they're selling their forests, that their livelihood, and for just pennies on the dollar. And all the money doesn't go to these communities. It's going to the so-called big guy, right? Or these corporations that are the ones profiting off it, not the communities. So to get the communities aware of what's going on, and then also to get them behind wanting to protect it instead of destroying it, is really important. So are there groups on the ground that have been doing a lot of community outreach to get them involved? Is that why they're starting to slow the destruction?
There is, yeah, community is a tough one in and around Losa. Some of them are very influenced, and they'll just grow palm oil just because they see everyone else doing it. And the trouble is with the Losa ecosystem, the infrastructure around the ecosystem is still very minimal, and it's not getting into these communities. So there is groups doing outreach programs, but sadly they're still being influenced by the bigger players. There is one group there that there's it's called Losa Coffee, where they do these amazing coffee, and they're actually trying to do something different. But yes, community is being sort of informed on what else they can grow, but it's slow. It is slow on that front, purely because of
Yeah.
I think what holds Losa back compared to other national parks around the world is the infrastructure for tourism is not there. Like as you were there, right? You witnessed
Yes.
it, and we were literally on foot. And as I was saying to you, Losa is one of those places where it's a true frontier. It's still very wild, as in your national parks, say in the US, they're beautiful and you have stunning biodiversity and landscapes, but it's all very manicured. You have your roads systems where your rules, your regulations. It's very controlled. Whereas there, when we took those longboats going up the river, we were going into those jungles and it was wild. There's no infrastructure. There's no
truly wild. Yes.
Yeah. So I think in time it will get better on the community outreach, and it is happening. Like I said, I haven't been back for a few years, so I don't know exactly what's going on the ground now, but there are groups working with community explaining the value of an orangutan. But until they see direct value of tourism coming and paying to see these orangutans you can think how big Losa is. I think it's 2.7 million hectares. So you've got areas, say, for example, Bukit Lawang, which we spent some time. The tourism
that was magical.
The tourism is there's a lot of tourism there. They call it the Kuta of the jungle, as in there's a lot of tourism just along that river, and they're all benefiting from being guides, being rangers, restaurants. Whereas other places are very isolated, and there's no direct tourism. Like when we went to that area of Losa and we worked with the guide Raja, he was just a guy. He was an ex-poacher, and he just wanted to work with us because he didn't want to poach anymore. He needed an outlet, and either get groups like us coming every now and again, and he gets some income, or he goes and works for the palm oil plantation, or goes in illegal logging, or goes poaching. So it's just going to take time. And so the trip like we did, that's important. It gives them something to hold on to and go, oh, that was pretty special. I made good money. I got to show these tourists from all over the world this amazing forest that I live next to. So it's a positive thing, but it's, once again, it just takes time. And that's why the Losa is very special and unique. And you won't, like I said, you won't experience a place like that because you think of all those rivers. There's no dammed rivers. All those rivers are still wild. Yeah. Whereas most places in the world, everything's dammed, everything's controlled. So,
that's so incredible. Wow. Well, so you've documented some of the most devastating environmental crimes. How do you process the emotional toll of it and witnessing like such destruction? Like, what keeps you going?
Well, what keeps me going?
I know.
What keeps me going is the love of the natural world, the biodiversity. Obviously, I go to these places and I see the beauty, which is what I live for. But I also have to go and show the truth, and that's I can't. I feel like you can't enjoy one without the other. You really need to show people. I feel like I need to show people what's happening, and then it's up to them to sort of what they do with that information. But all I can do is keep saying, well, this is happening. This is what's causing it. How and even just create the conversation, and then people can start talking about it, and maybe throughout their spending power or their life choices, they can make a difference. But I'm okay. I always have the camera between me and the subject, and obviously when I'm following sort of wildlife crime, there is some space. I've learned to put some space between me and the subject, because if there wasn't, it could easily literally destroy your mental health. And I never forget that image of when I went and photographed that pangolin bust in Indonesia, and nothing really prepared me for the going up to that pit that was full of 4,000 or 5,000 frozen pangolins that they'd intercepted. They were en route from Indonesia to Vietnam. And I remember walking up in the morning. It was like 5:30, 6 in the morning. And I walked up to this pit where they were going to burn all the contraband. And I wasn't sure what I was going to see. And I walked up and I remember looking down. It was just like a sea of frozen pangolins. And it was such a waste. It was so sad on so many levels.
Right.
And that picture got to me. I sort of remember leaving, and I was sort of shell shocked. It was strange. But then over time, I've learned to process it and deal with it. But it's not for the faint-hearted. I'm sort of I've got quite a good mental capacity to deal with it, but I don't think a lot of people could actually, seeing it year after year. But then, like I said, I get to see the beauty and these stunning places, and it balances out.
Right.
But it's hard. It's not to be taken lightly.
Have you ever been threatened or pressured to suppress a story?
Yeah, I've had death threats. I've been
You have.
hit with steel bars. I've been chased down the road. I've been sworn at. I've been cursed
Oh
at.
my.
Literally everything you can think of. The amount of times that you get to a point where you go, why is it so hard to tell the truth, to show the truth? So normally I go into a situation and I have to, photograph, have to literally go in and take pictures before they shut me down. Because if I didn't, the world wouldn't see those images. And a lot of the time I've trespassed, I've gone into areas I shouldn't. And, maybe it's a bit of white man privilege. I've walked into these places and got to a point before they shut me down. So, that's obviously a privilege, in Asia that I've used for the greater good as far as I'm concerned. I've been able to go into these places and take photographs before they push me out the door. Maybe for someone else, they wouldn't have even got in the door. But yeah, like I said, I've had a few death threats when I was up in China documenting whale shark processing plants. That was just before racing extinction. There was an investigation on the shark fin trade, and me and a colleague, Alex Hofford, were investigating this processing plant where they're taking over 600 whale sharks a year, basking sharks, great white sharks. And these are all protected species, internationally protected. And I never forget walking to the courtyard and it was full of giant whale shark fins. And they were processing the fins, they were using this shark oil, the skin, that's actually, that processing plant has been shut down since, and that was a win. But I don't know what else is happening in that area, because I sort of was shut down from China not long after that. I've been sort of banned from China.
You have. Wow. I wanted to ask you about that because I remember seeing some of the pictures you took of just shark fins covering an entire roof. Just a huge roof filled with, it must have been hundreds, if not thousands of shark fins. And it's just so devastating to see that amount. It's just so extreme. And it just seems like, how is there going to be any left if this is just one roof and this one time that you're there? I know over 50% of shark and ray species are threatened with extinction due to these unsustainable, obviously, fishing practices, and coupled with the high demand in the international fin trade. So do you see that getting better, or is it, because you said that one plant's shut down, but I know it's still such a large scale problem. So are we going to see any changes before this number gets out of hand and we see the extinction of sharks and rays?
No, don't say that.
I know, I don't want to, but it's scary when you see these pictures. You're like, this is 50%, not sustainable.
80 or 90% of sharks are fast tracking towards extinction, sadly.
Right.
So there has been some real movement in Hong Kong and sort of southern China with the awareness, and the consumption is down. But those rooftops you're talking about were in Taiwan. There was some in Hong Kong, but Taiwan really pulled those, where there was literally thousands of sharks in one location.
Yeah.
And then if you tried to picture them alive,
it was heartbreaking.
What that would look like.
Right.
And those images were taken about 2015, and then just before COVID, so 2019. Actually, no, I was there 2023. I went back to Taiwan to look at the scale. Just coming out of COVID, and I went back, and sadly, there was drying facilities still with shark fins all over those roofs. The industry has changed, where sadly a lot of the consumption is going to Southeast Asia, for the fins. So before it was North Asia, and now it seems to be Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam. They're all consuming. They get quite influenced by China, sadly. So a lot of the consumption has moved south, but also Europe is consuming a lot more shark meat unintentionally.
Really?
A lot of the time, people are consuming,
Wow.
fish, but they don't actually know what it is. Oh, it's a white fish, and it's the market traders pushing it, renaming it. Even here in Australia, there's a group here that looked at many different fish outlets where they're selling seafood, and a lot of the fish that they called snapper actually was shark. So it's that. It's that fish protein that's just being rebranded, renamed, and people are oblivious. A lot of people never ask what kind of white fish this is, or this is snapper, but do you actually know what kind of fish you're eating? It can be mislabeled, and it is being mislabeled globally. So the fishing
I've heard
industry
that.
is
It's so
shaping,
disturbing.
as fish stocks go down, they just move to a different protein. And that's the problem with eating seafood. I don't really endorse it unless you're going to catch your own fish, one line, one fish, then,
Right.
I can endorse that. But really, if you're just buying seafood and expecting it to be what they say it is, I think that is a huge issue. So is it getting better? It's hard to say. The shift has changed. Like we all blame, the Chinese are eating shark fin, but it's actually a global issue of shark consumption. Whether it's fins, whether it's meat, it's still happening. And I actually don't know how these fishing boats I don't know how the ocean keeps providing the biodiversity, the amount of sharks. I never forget one guy when I was photographing back in Hong Kong, and there was piles of shark fin in this retail shop, and I said to him, "Wow!" there's not so many sharks left," and he goes, "Oh, don't worry about it. They breed like cockroaches." So many people are ignorant to the fact that the sea is just so abundant, and we'll just keep providing and keep providing. But we've learned, once fish stocks they decline very quickly. 1 minute there, next thing they're gone. There's no sort of slow sort of trickle. It's the fish are there and then they're gone, and then it's like, they literally drop off a cliff. The shark one for regulating the ocean's ecosystem, being an apex predator, it's such a big deal. So I don't know what to say. It's just still happening.
I know.
And
And for anyone that doesn't know, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was just gonna say they oftentimes they'll cut the fins, and then just out of complete haste and efficiency, that they'll just put them back in the water alive to just sink to the bottom and die, basically. So they're still alive when they're having their fins cut off, and then being put back in their home with no means of being able to swim like they used to. It's just like absolutely heartbreaking and so barbaric. I just don't understand, honestly.
You think of the tourism value that's being lost, like Fiji and Tahiti. They have these huge dive industries around going to swim with sharks, and like Fiji's over 50-60 million annually just for one dive site to swim with bull sharks and tiger sharks. So all these places like Indonesia, where they're one of the biggest exports of shark fin, that could be turned around very quickly for tourism if that resource is managed properly. And there's so much more money, and it's ongoing. Whereas you take a shark off those reefs, those sharks are gone completely, and they're not coming back because they're very, they're territorial to those specific reefs. And once they're gone, they're not coming back. So there is alternatives, but it's just, once again, it needs a lot of, like in these developing nations, it needs a lot of sort of support from governments and charities to really help these communities shift from the fishery based to tourism. It's, once again, it's just,
I think that That's why the photojournalism and seeing the pictures and seeing the footage, because a picture tells 1,000 words, right? And when you see these videos and pictures, it's like, it's so shocking, and it really does wake people up to see that this is a problem. Like, this is not sustainable, and it just hopefully makes a difference in showing people
Yeah, I
the
really,
truth of what's going on, so we can.
yeah, those photographs, I always try and show scale, just show the like, one photograph, if you can just show volume, and then it really
Exactly.
could amplify it. Hold on, this is serious. This is not to be taken lightly. And that's what I try and do
Exactly.
with the images. Yeah.
Yeah, so important. Okay, so well, let's, I guess, switch into the Australian logging problem. I know that's been your main focus most recently, and it's just become so bad over there. And I know 80%, 85% of it I've read is from the cattle industry. That's why they're logging in the Koala National
Okay,
Forest. Is that
there's two issues going on, but yeah, correct. As in, the Great Koala National Park was proposed on the east coast of Australia. So what it was a network of national parks, but within these national parks, there was state forest. And as we realize koalas are tracking towards extinction because of the climate shift, of deforestation, there's so many issues, and viruses. They thought, there was groups, the National Parks Department of New South Wales, which is one of our states on the East Coast, thought it was a really good idea to create this iconic national park that would really allow koalas to thrive on the east coast of Australia. And why this national park is so important is because it's forest from the sea level up into the mountains to the sort of New South Wales plateau. So it's a really good elevation. So as the climate warms, these animals can move up and down depending on the temperature. So they have a place to go when it warms or cools. They can move up and down these mountain ranges. And internationally, creating the Great Koala National Park is such a draw card, right? And it just makes sense on so many levels going into the future, as in carbon sink, as in biodiversity protection, ecosystem services. That national park holds two of the major water catchments for the area, so the water's protected, the resource waters, which is so important as this climate changes and warms. So, and the government promised that they would create this Great Koala National Park, and the new Labor government was elected, and they just keep stalling, and they're continually, the Forestry Corporation, which is government funded forestry, are going in there just logging the hell out of it. And it's almost like this great land grab. They're getting as much as they can, and
wow,
like, people are sort of gobsmacked. They promised they would create this national park, and still nothing. So that's under the present government. They just seem to be hell bent on taking as many trees as possible, and that the Forestry Corporation is subsidised by taxpayers' money here. It's not sort of making money, and they always talk about job creation, but those jobs could easily be transitioned to forest guardians, and they could actually move to plantation forests that we could get our timber from. So I don't know why it's so hard. And then you've got land clearing in different states here in Australia, clearing for beef. Particularly here in Queensland, they're clearing so much land for beef production. And then disguising it under the name of, it's grass-fed, sorry.
Fed, yeah.
Grass-fed, and it's making it all clean that, it's not in cattle lots where they're not grain-fed. They're out on these green rolling pastures, and it's all beautiful, but actually, no, there's a lot of destruction to create that. So it's it's a bit of an issue. And once again, you just shake your head and go, why is this happening? Why is this allowed to continue on this scale? And we're talking about huge amounts of forest being cleared for beef production.
Huge. I mean, just again, going back to seeing photos of it, the destruction is just, it's rampant. And so is anyone taking to the streets or protests going on there?
Yeah, there's some
Or
good
are you
groups,
just,
but it seems to be in Australia. Like I've only been back a few years. Before that, I was living in Indonesia and China, in Hong Kong. So I've been back a few years, and people, Australia's people seem to be so comfortable. They're sort of comfortably numb. I don't, there's not enough people to see any value in protesting or, don't get me wrong, there's some great people. Bob Brown Foundation are doing so much. They're, locking themselves onto trees. They're really,
oh,
giving it to the loggers and doing what they can. But Australia's coming down hard on activism, and people are being put in jail for just trying to do the right thing. So it's,
wild.
I just don't, people just don't really see the seriousness of it. I suppose because Australia is so big, the population is so small, they just seem to think our forests will go on forever. And they don't, they're shrinking very quickly. And being one of the hottest countries in the world, why would you cut down your forests? We don't have a lot of forests, but it's so important to regulate the climate.
Right.
And it's just getting drier,
Right.
creating more, it's just going to create bigger fires by thinning that forest canopy. So yeah, it's a major issue down here.
Yeah, because they're ancient forests, and they took hundreds of years to become the living, breathing entities of interconnected networks that they are. And you can't just go and replant trees that are going to, it's not going to be the same as what this living, breathing entity that we have that took so many hundreds of years to develop, and now think that just planting some trees is going to fix the problem.
Yeah, and they're all exactly that. Here in Australia, they're all about the offset. Oh, don't worry, we're going to cut these trees and we're going to replant. Right. And we're going to wait 30, 40, 50 years for those trees to be good for us, for the biodiversity and for the planet. It's, the logic. Like, I would like to see deforestation globally stopped, halted right now, because trees are our biggest asset.
Yes.
Let's keep our trees standing. The amount of carbon it's just in the news here, it's just not discussed. Like we talk about transitioning to cleaner energy, but no one's ever said, well, let's stop cutting down our native forests. It's like a no-brainer.
Right. The easiest, cheapest thing to do. Why are we not doing it? It's mind-boggling. I actually just read about. Yes, it's insane. It's like we're literally living Avatar in on our planet, and yet everyone's just sticking their heads in the sand and pretending it's not happening. And then you've got the climate deniers that just say climate change isn't even real, or that it's a hoax and a propaganda by the government. But whether or not, whatever you want to call it, the fact that we're cutting down the lungs of our planet, that I read that the Congo Basin, there's a carbon sink that takes in a third of the U.S. emissions that we emit. It sucks that, all the mess that we put into the atmosphere, it sucks that in for us and gives us fresh oxygen. So just knowing that, it's like so logical to not cut these places down. We need them for a healthy planet. So it's just like, it seems so common sense, and yet we are so ass backwards to put it in layman's terms. It's just like, what can we do? We have to really make this part of the global conversation, and quickly, because I'm just scared at the amount of devastation that we're losing, whether it's in Australia, the Congo Basin.
It's all connected. It's Sumatra. Like whatever happens in the US, exactly. It's happening here. It's all, if we're cutting down trees here, it's affecting the whole planet. Whatever's happening in Africa.
Exactly.
It's one closed system, and people think, oh, it's happening up there. It's not going to affect us. It's fine. Hello.
Right.
It's just
it's all of our air.
Exactly.
Yes.
And trees to me is like the single biggest thing that we could be doing. It's all, people go, oh, well, let's go and plant some trees. How about we just leave the trees in the ground that we have? That's a good start.
Exactly. Exactly.
And obviously these developing nations, they need support to keep their trees in the ground. Countries like Gabon in Africa, they have 8% of the forest cover. And we need to support these developing countries to keep their forests in the ground. Let's keep them standing. And
exactly.
I don't know about what's going on in the US. Drill, baby, drill.
Oh my God. And the logging, they're apparently now they're opening our national parks to logging. I mean, when we don't even have, we've lost 80% of what we used to have in America. And all we have left is our national parks. Anything wild is in these national parks. And now they want to go in there and cut down what remains. It's just, it's so wild. I can't believe no one's taken to the streets yet. Yeah, it's overwhelming and I don't know how we can stop it, but I think the first key is awareness and raising our voices and getting the truth out there to expose what's going on so that people can at least
obviously your diet,
try to organize.
the way you spend your money, supporting these industries.
Yep. Voting with their dollars.
Never buy, farm salmon, just that industry alone. Yeah. If you're going to eat meat, cut down on your meat consumption. Really think about where your meat's coming from, if you have to eat meat. But everyone just needs to do their part, especially in the West. We have a lot of choice. You think someone, downtown Mogadishu or somewhere, they're literally trying to survive. And we can't expect them to step up.
Exactly.
But, being privileged, born in a Western country, we don't really have any, I feel like it's a responsibility that we should be all doing whatever we can to make things right. And yeah, we can say it's not going to make a difference, but every little, thing you do adds up. It does have, value. It has power. I never forget once I agree. I just got out the water with these sperm whales in Timor, and because I go through times where I think, what's the point? You think, what? I just throw in the towel. Is it worth it? And then I was sitting there having a bit of a moment, and it was raining. It was the water was really flat, and I was watching all these raindrops, and I was like in a sort of bit of a daydream actually. And then I'll never forget, I question my level of influence, and I'm sure we all do, right? You by doing this, you like to know that people, you may be influencing people, and that gives you some value and feels good what what's in your heart, what you actually want to do. And I remember sitting on the back of this boat and watching these raindrops fall, and then watching them just hit the sea, and then the sort of ripple effect going out and joining up with other raindrops. And it was like this, I got this sort of download of we're way more influential than we realize. We can really, create change, but just those little things you do, it actually goes out and resonates with other people and just goes on and on. But obviously I can never gauge that, but it gave me a moment of hope that actually we can be, really, we can influence change. But so everyone can really influence change, and just think of those little things you do does resonate and keep going. So that's how I get through the.
Yes.
I'm the ranger.
I love that. That was a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing
moments, right? I just got out of the water with this calf, a sperm whale. And it was a beautiful moment. And then it was just, the water was real like oil slick. It was just so flat and calm. And then these raindrops, and it was all just these rings connecting into each other, just going. Yeah.
Wow.
Maybe we can make change, but everyone has to get on board. Everyone needs to be part of it.
Yes. We need all hands on deck for sure. That also reminds me of that story of there's a kid that's walking down the beach, and there's hundreds of the starfish washed up on shore, and he says he's throwing them back in the water, and someone says what are you doing? They're not going to make a difference. There's hundreds of them here, and every time he throws one, he goes, I made a difference to that one. I made a difference to that one. So that's a cute little story that your raindrop one reminded me of too.
That's it.
Really, every action does matter. And I think if people all thought that way, then you'd think a little more about all your daily actions and choices. So yeah. That was good. Yeah. Let's see. What else do I have here for you? Okay. Well, so I guess this kind of ties into what we were just talking about. You might have kind of already answered it, but humans have a long history of treating animals with disrespect and of conquering lands. Everywhere we go, conquering lands. So do you see us becoming more or less compassionate and civilized? I
I
know it's hard because we see both, right?
No, I think like I said, there's a lot of good people doing a lot of great work, and obviously the sort of indigenous sort of tribes around the world
Mm,
always felt this and spoken this language, and been more harmonious with the planet. And I think I think the coin
yes.
is dropping because the planet is teaching us, these lessons, and these lessons will come either way. If we don't listen, those will get the download, and it's already happening with the crazy climate. Things are happening. We will be forced
Yep.
into listening to this planet, and we are being, and things are changing. But it could have been very different. We might not have had to go through these extreme weather events if we had have listened earlier. But now we're being forced to.
Yes.
So
I feel like our earth is screaming at us. So
yeah, and it's
that's a
only
good
it's
point.
only going to accelerate, and
Mm-hmm.
so we have to do all we can, and people sometimes go, oh well, I've lost hope, and it's like, well, what else are we going to do if we don't start stepping up and getting involved? Then are we going to wait for these governments, these people that are running the countries? Look at
Right.
the state of the planet now. Would you
Yeah.
like sit down and even have a coffee with these people? It's just like I wouldn't even give them the time of day.
No.
It's just
it's
men and their
it's
egos. And
mind
it's
blowing.
I just,
Mm-hmm.
I just, I actually have no words. It's where we are at with what's happening, you know, geopolitically on the
I
planet.
know.
It's,
Yes. And we have billionaires that are trying to go to Mars that's covered in dirt when we have literally the most beautiful planet with the most amazing creatures, and they're doing nothing to help us save and protect and preserve what we have. And it's mind-blowing because it almost seems like also just such a money grab of like the loggers that are going in. Are they just trying to just get the most money that they can before our world just absolutely dies? It's just I don't, and I want to be hopeful. So I hope, we're enough of us are going to wake up and step up and make the changes that we need to before that happens. But it's just like the craziness of the profiting it's like that old Indian quote of creative, when the last river is poisoned, the last tree cut down, well, you finally realize that you can't eat money,
I know
you know?
that's the irony. That's sort of, yeah, it's, I don't know. I wake up and I just, where's it all going? It's like we're
Right.
accelerating to what end? It's like the human race has a
Mm-hmm.
sickness, and the Native Americans talked about it. It's talked about 7 generations, and they saw this white man sickness, and it's like you look at what's going on and you just think, yeah, well, it's just been a great land grab globally, and it still is, and it's the old ways, and just like Trump recently blocking the U.S. aid, something like 375 million annually a year has just been wiped off conservation. And then you've got all the rest of the
Terrifying.
funds that were, put out there to actually help do good across the world. That's all gone. And just think, where's it all going? I understand domestically he wants to make America great again, but you know, whatever happened to leading by example, and it's, yeah, it's a real worry, and it's a scary time for
Mm-hmm.
biodiversity and ecosystem services. We only have 4% of the wildlife left on the planet. 4%.
That is, yeah, staggering,
And
mind
then
blowing.
you take that 4% away, and then think of the planet. Just take that out. Where's the magic? Yeah, four.
No, I don't want to live in this AI world. I want a world with forests and elephants.
Who doesn't?
Like,
Imagine that gone, and like, oh, it used to be. Like, it's really serious times, really critical.
I know. I just talked to Grant Fowles, and they've already lost 425 rhinos since the beginning of the year. We're only in March, and it's, when you look at where their numbers are at, we can't go on. They're going to be extinct if we don't stop this crazy poaching crisis. But I digress. All right. My sister, who's a biology teacher, says she sees it with her students. They haven't experienced a lot of the natural world. They're so tech focused, right? So they don't seem to care when she tells them that a species went extinct or that a
Yeah.
land has disappeared. And so how do we foster that love for animals, that you and I have, and that some people have, but when it's becoming more and more rare for people to experience them, I
Get them
just
off
feel
their
like
devices.
technologies.
Kids need to get off.
Right.
You need to get them out. Get them out of
In nature.
their comfort zone and put them in nature without devices. Take them on a week camp with no devices.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that obviously
true.
I could imagine the protests, the kids, no, not my. But honestly, and that's when I saw it with my own kids. Like I would go camping during COVID. I would get in the car and take them into the Australian outback, away from signal, and their phone signals would drop out. And then they start to really look around and explore where they are and look for different sort of. They were looking for these little opals, these semi-precious stones out in one area we're at, and then they just go exploring to the forest and look at birds, and they come alive. It's in all of us, but it's the devices are literally taking away that life force, that curiosity, that exploration. The kids are not kids like when I grew up. Like I was literally out 24/7, and I'd only come home as the sun was going down, and yeah, so it's really, I think, get them off their devices somehow. Even if it's just for a day, get them in nature and get them off devices. And you can slowly start to build that relationship with the land. But it's not easy.
So important.
And obviously,
I know.
The technology can really educate them, inform them on all these things, but to really touch and smell and feel it. I don't know, do kids go and catch tadpoles anymore? I used to love catching tadpoles.
I know. I don't know. I loved playing outside, and I'd rescue anything I could. Little birds, little possums, anything that needed saving. I was there, and I just loved playing. I hope parents are still getting their kids in the dirt and in nature, and that's where we belong. And like you said, where you come alive.
Get their hands dirty. Yeah.
Yes.
Plant a tree.
Yeah.
Grow some vegetables. Just get them outside.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it helps them find you tap into you instead of being so in the outside external technology stuff. You just drop into your soul more.
Yeah.
So I think it's so important. I love that you touched on that. Thank you. Going back to your time in the Southeast Asian countries, you've witnessed some of the horrors of the underground trade and circuses there. You've seen, obviously, the bear bile farms. You've seen bears forced to ride bicycles. I remember you telling me about that, and monkeys performing tricks. So how do you capture those type of just abuses and horrors and remain optimistic for us as a culture to overcome these barbaric ways of treating animals and exploiting them for entertainment? And how can we educate and shift viewpoints in these cultures fast enough before it's too late for so many species?
Well, that's a big question.
I know.
Okay. Well, no,
it's going to take a lot of boot on the ground efforts and education, obviously, in those countries.
Yeah. Once again, you can look at, I remember when I was a kid, there was always these traveling circuses with lions and elephants and traveling around the country in big tops. They've gone in the West. Mostly. I don't know, in America you probably saw.
Yes.
Here in Australia, we only have Circus du Soleil and Dragon, the acrobats doing human body doing amazing things. And they're really the only circuses that exist now. I think a few years ago there was a Russian circus that had a tiger or something. But so that's changed quite quickly, as in they've been phased out and it's happening. And a lot of these sort of theme parks still there in these third world countries or developing nations, whereas those bears are actually in China, where they're riding bikes and jumping through fire and all of that, and that's just sadly, unfortunately for a lot of these animals, it's a living hell. It's just going to take time as society evolves. People will start to see them as more conscious beings. I've sort of had so many times where I've been in a situation where I've had to find wildlife, or I've gone into a forest and people say, well, you're not going to find them in a couple of days, and there is some connection going on that I can't deny in my career, where things just turn up when I need them to turn up, and then when I photograph these animals in different, I starting to think about the consciousness, and I think we all share a consciousness that's of earthlings. Like we assume we're like the supreme, animal on the planet, or we're human and we're very different and we have a high level of consciousness. I believe we all share that, every living species, and that's what it is to be an earthling. There is consciousness there, which is obviously we haven't taken the time, and I think with AI we're starting to understand, say for example cetaceans, whales more, and we're starting to communicate with primates and the great apes, and dogs we're starting to understand their language. And I think the consciousness flows through everything, and I think that is, the coin's going to drop, and we're going to realize that we can't just justify by eating a cow and thinking it's not conscious, because they're all conscious. And it's just, once we tap into that, we're going to look at the world very differently. And I've just experienced so many things where wildlife just presents itself. And I remember once I was in Malaysia and had a few days in the forest, and I had to look for these pygmy jungle elephants, and they weren't turning up. And then I was in a car driving back to sort of the base camp, and we saw these elephants cross the road, and I'm like, they'd gone into the forest, I just missed them, and they'd gone right in. I stood on the side of the road saying, come back, I need to photograph them. And they literally all turned around, came back, and did this whole show for about 10 minutes. Video them and photograph them, and then they left. But that's happened time and time again. It's like it became a little bit ridiculous that they just turn up when I need them to turn up.
Wow.
And at first you think it's a coincidence, and then it just keeps happening and happening and happening. So I don't know.
That's beautiful.
There's obviously, I feel like there is some connection going on with every living thing. And I think, the state of the planet, everything is feeling what you're feeling, what I'm feeling. That's uneasiness about the planet and what's going on and how we're managing it and how things are changing. So
yes,
it's just going back to the circus and mistreatment of animals, and as if they're secondary, and it's going to take time. As in humans,
it's a consciousness
thing. Humans are. It is happening. It's just how fast, and can we accelerate that so people can grasp what actually is going on? And they are just feeling exactly like we are. They have those emotions, and in the future it'll all come out. We'll realize that that's what it is to be an earthling. Like we feel it, they're feeling it, but we are just not picking up on those signals.
When you watch like any mother, like whether it's a mother polar bear or mother tiger or lion with their babies, you literally feel and see that they're so much like us. They're just like us. It's so beautiful.
And so why do we think we're better than anything else? That's that's the question. Why do we get to say we're better than every other species? That's what everyone needs to ask themselves.
Yeah,
we're not.
I know. Throw you in the ocean. Let's watch you swim millions of miles like the whales do and communicate with your, it's just a different kind of intelligence. So
no, it's a wiser intelligence, because they don't destroy their life. We are fundamentally flawed.
They live in harmony with everything.
We are fundamentally flawed, and we need to, when we get to that point of realizing, it's not sustainable. And the more you look into nature, the lessons are all there.
Yes. Yeah, it really is the indigenous way that we need to go.
My dog has been one of my biggest teachers.
Yeah, I love that.
Unconditional love.
Totally.
Like on another level.
Yes.
If we all could be like a dog and love, hello.
I know.
It's so that simple. It's everywhere around us. If you just stop and listen and feel it, it's all there.
Yes.
It's all there. But like trees, you look at a forest, and I walk through the forest and think about, okay, what's happening on what I can see, but then underground, there's all these different species coexisting, and their roots are intertwined, and there's no sort of, there's no racism. They're all these different species locked in together and coexisting,
Working together.
working together, and it's like it's beautiful. And you think, why can't we be like that? Why is it all this segregation? And it's all nature's just it's all there in front of you. Just have to
Yeah,
see it
it's
and listen.
incredible.
It's all there.
Have you read The Secret Life of Trees?
I
How they all talk to
decided I
each
had,
other
but
and communicate.
yeah, and it's true.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's all it's all
The
happening.
intelligence of a tree. Yeah. Have you ever been faced with ethical dilemmas when you're capturing the suffering of animals or exploited workers in illegal industries? Have you ever had to intervene, or have you never been able to?
What, to stop someone killing something or?
Yeah, or whatever you're witnessing, cutting down a tree or like the Pangolian trade. Have you ever like had that urge to just like, oh, if I could just save this one, but then you can't really intervene because you're there to bear witness and
No, I do.
take the photograph. So,
I've stepped in where had this hawksbill turtle, and I managed to get the fishermen to let it go. But even though they wanted to sell
oh,
it,
you did.
there's been
Wow.
times. It's hard because obviously they're trying to put food on the table. I've been with poachers, and they've had birds in these cages, and we've destroyed those cages and let the birds go.
Oh, amazing.
It is amazing, but at the same time, then maybe they go without a meal.
I'm gonna go get him again.
Well, I'm
Oh,
going to go
or
get them
right,
again.
it's their livelihood. Yeah.
So there's always that internal conflict, but yeah, you can only sort of do what you can in that any given moment and whatever feels right. And it's hard because I know a lot of people are doing it because there's not alternatives. And yeah, it just comes down to what's happening in that moment. Yeah, like I said, it's an internal conflict.
Yeah.
And I understand both sides. I've been with poachers, and they're actually good people being exploited, say, by the palm oil industry, and they have to go and substitute their income by catching a pangolin. It's going to give them, an extra few $100s a month, and they're going to be able to put the kid in a better school, or.
Right.
So it's hard.
Which is why like these US aid programs and maybe the ones that they're cutting aren't good and they're not going to good programs. So I think it would be important for us to know and be able to decipher which ones aren't like what are really a waste of money, but then to be able to replace instead of just cutting all US aid like they're doing, to be able to provide aid to these impoverished communities and give them a different way, help them learn a new skill or a new way of farming or a new way to be able to make income so that they're not going into the forest and they're not having to poach animals and cut down trees and do illegal logging in order to feed their families.
Sure.
So I think that we could be doing so much good with helping, through USAID if the money was going to the right projects. So
Sure.
I wish that we weren't just cutting it all together.
Yeah.
So we'll have to figure out how to make a difference there. But let's see. I think I just have a couple last questions for you. So you've infiltrated some of the worst illegal wildlife trafficking networks. What's maybe something people don't understand about how these operate, how these black market networks operate?
Well, it's just more the exotic pet trade, really. I think America is the second biggest consumers of exotic pets on the planet.
Yeah.
I think, and then China's up there, but America is a huge market for the exotic pet trade. And I think there's people, they want to own these animals. And to me, it's very black and white, as in, yeah, some of these species can be farmed and bred in captivity, but you're still providing, a sort of loophole for those remaining wild population to come into the market and have no traceability, whether it's a farmed or whether it's a wild caught chameleon, for example. And yeah, animals are supposed to be wild in their environment, and to have them stuck in these small cages for the term of their natural life, I just don't agree with it. And look, I had pets as a kid. I had pets for a while. The only pets I really had were injured birds, injured reptiles that I kept. I managed to rehabilitate some of them, and they were released back into the wild. And that was sort of how it was for me. There's certain species that can be kept, as exotic pets, but majority of it was all the reptiles and mammals and primates that just shouldn't be kept as pets. And I think the industry, it's a huge problem globally. And now I see a lot of American species and African species coming across to Asia. So now they're jumping on the bandwagon, and they want to keep exotic pets, and like otters and, different kinds of monkeys and different kinds of birds. And it's obviously people do feel compelled to have these exotic animals. They want to be around biodiversity. But if we could just manage our space a bit more, wildlife would and could be present in our lives. For example, I've just come back from Nepal, and they've done so well at rewilding or managing the existing populations of rhinos and tigers. They've increased rapidly.
Yes.
And it's so promising to see the numbers increasing, but now they having to work out how to sort of manage wildlife human conflict and how to live alongside rhinos and tigers. And there was one area that you literally go down the street and there's a Indian one-horned rhino walking down the street, and people are just watching it go by. Matter of fact, oh, there goes a rhino walking down the street, and it's just going. It's left the national park, is walking through to a bit of farmland or forest, and then they come back through the area. And obviously, it's good for tourism, and obviously there is some serious implications with having this megafauna walk down the street. But it's slowly in that area, it's coming back. So I think biodiversity would flourish and can flourish. And if we're going to rewild the world, what does that look like, and how do we live alongside wildlife? Because I always say that you can change wildlife, you can change our behavior, but you can't change a rhino's behavior. So it's
right.
But given time and things will come back. Birds will come back. You start planting trees again in your garden. If you've got a bit of space, you create a space, biodiversity will turn up. Frogs will turn up. Lizards will turn up. Doesn't matter where you are, it will always come back. So rather than thinking about owning it, and I think that's a very sort of, you speak to Indigenous people, they never owned anything. It was all, it existed together. There was no ownership. We've created this ownership mentality, and I think we need to think about, what does ownership mean on anything, on any level? But if you create a space, wherever it is, biodiversity turns up. Insects, butterflies turn up. So it's like, maybe that's what we should think about. If we create a space, it'll come to us. We don't need to have pets. They'll just turn up. I have, birds regularly just turning up on my little...
Yeah, we just heard one.
Parrots turn up and kookaburras
singing at us.
And they just turn up, and it's like, they they're quite happy to coexist if we give them the space and the time. So
yes, I love that. Really happy to hear about the success that Nepal has had with their conservation efforts. That really does give so much hope.
Yeah, I think
and
like
it serves as
rewilding,
such a great example.
Yeah, and the UK, England has put in, they've put beavers back, where they've created natural dams, and they're out of the system, and they put them back into the system, and it's slowly happening. Singapore has otters running all over the island now.
Oh my God, they're so cute.
They're like these urban otters, and everyone's comfortable living alongside otters. And
yes,
I think
awesome.
that's the world we should be thinking about living in. We all can coexist.
Yes, please.
Yes, we're human population. We need to look at that, and I think, Mother Nature will sadly manage that for us. But living alongside biodiversity, it's possible. And I think that's the dream. I think that's what we should all be aiming for. Yeah.
Yes. Well, one thing my sister and I were talking about that we loved about you on our trip was that you have this like childlike wonder, and that you still have this like innocence and just
Well,
optimism
I don't know about
despite having
that.
seen such horrible
Well, yeah,
things.
because
You
you got to
do.
think about what it could be like. What world do you actually want to live in? It's all still possible.
Yes, and hold on to that.
Yeah, it's all
Oh yeah.
there. Just whether you give it space, give it, a thought in your day and the craziness. Yeah.
I love that. Well, so if you had one message to humanity, what would it be? You've kind of already said a lot that I appreciate so much, but I guess if you had one last thing to leave our audience with, what would it be?
Oh, God, you're putting me on the spot.
I know. I'm sorry.
No, just give biodiversity time and space, and it will present itself. Just be open to it,
Oh,
and it will turn up. That's the sort of dream
I
for
love it.
me. Let's rewild the world, and let's live alongside. Let's get it right the way it should have been from the beginning.
Yes.
It's not that hard.
Yes.
Not that hard.
And instead of when they're seeing the bad images that they're not feeling powerless and apathy, we have to overcome our apathy and our feeling of powerlessness and start to realize it's in our hands, and we've really got to get all hands on deck for this.
Get down to the ocean or get down to a lake and just watch those raindrops.
Yes.
Watch what they do.
Yes. I love it.
It's all there.
Oh, this was such a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much.
I hope I gave
Paul.
you enough to work with, and I can send you some imagery and stuff. And
Yes, please send me all the videos and images that you think would be great for this. But it was an absolute pleasure. Always love seeing you and chatting with you. So thank you, and thank you for all the important work that you do. Seriously, you are a true hero for our planet, and I
do what I
love you
can
so
when I
much for
can.
that. So
Thank you.
yes, you're awesome. You are a real life badass. Thank you for being on the good team avatar.
Yeah, cool. Okay, thank you.
Amazing. All right, we'll talk soon. This podcast is for those who do not subscribe to life in black or white, but live and search within the gray area where truth resides. It's for those Steve Jobs talked about when he said, "Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do."